Woohoo!
Okay, it's up to you there, Seth. You can explain.
There is some kind of squeaking going on in the background. I don't know where that's from.
I'm on the YouTube channel and it's not yet streaming, even though it says it is.
Yeah, it says
I went there and it said,
on
and it was
YouTube.
streaming.
It is streaming?
Yeah. Dan just said, Seth, you could explain.
Yeah, so we should be live now, I think. Are we live? Yeah, okay. So sorry for the technical difficulties tonight. We have a delayed start to our Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting. This is the September meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee of the City of Ithaca. I believe is Joanne? Let's see here. I know that public comment is first on the agenda. I'm not sure if there are people who are logged in for public comment. No? Okay.
We haven't sent out the new link to people, so we're gonna have to, Joanne's gonna have to send that out, or whoever has that list of email addresses will have to send it out.
Is Joanne logged in?
I don't see her yet.
Okay. I think we should probably come back to public comment. Given I know we've had a lot of different emails, a lot of them on the couplet, included in the agenda packet. We also had a few people reach out to speak on the CITAP IDA workforce housing issue. But I know that Heather McDaniel is here to speak on that issue, and I know there was a timing issue with her being able to speak tonight. So why don't we go ahead and start with that discussion. The special order of business on the IDA workforce housing requirement and CTAP boundary expansion. So we did, the committee did vote on the boundary expansion last month. We voted not to expand the boundary. So the piece that we're looking at now is the payment in lieu and the whole issue with the housing requirement. So I don't know if you want to, do you have anything you wanted to say? Just to start off, maybe summarize some of the work that you've been doing with the IDA Housing Committee.
Sure. So thank you for the opportunity to join your meeting tonight. You know, the IDA has been delivering incentives in the downtown density district for a little over 20 years now, and started doing that really because the city asked the IDA to do so. The IDA generally provides incentives to manufacturers and high-tech companies, but it's a very powerful tool to support development in other areas as well, in other sectors. So over that time, you know, the policy has changed a little bit. The IDA is a public authority. It's a private and it's a public entity that has the ability to abate property tax and sales tax. We generally will phase in the new property taxes associated with the project so that there are new taxes starting in year one for all the taxing jurisdictions. Several years ago, I want to say probably 2007, we really started looking at ways that we might be able to incentivize more affordable housing. At that time, we had a committee, a very large committee. We brought in a number of the affordable housing developers to talk about, hey, is there a way that we can try and promote more affordable housing? Generally, what we see at the IDA is that projects cannot financially make developers cannot financially make a project work. So that's why they're coming to the IDA to reduce some of those ongoing costs in the first few years, or 7 to 10 years generally, of their project, so that they can financially make their project work. The affordable housing developers at that time said, a declining incentive over 7 to 10 years probably isn't going to work for us. We are much better equipped to go to state and federal sources and combine lots of different resources to build affordable housing projects that remain affordable for 30, 40, 50 years, the IDA is not really the place to go. So we sort of stepped back for a couple of years. We have delivered incentives to a number of projects, some of those market rate housing projects, and some of those have been affordable housing projects. We've come up with some different scenarios over time. This really heated up, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and the IDA said, yeah, we'd like to look at it again. We did. We've had a committee that included members of the Common Council, members of city staff, members of the IDA. We've included developers along the way to try and get a better sense of the issue and how the IDA might be able to be used as a tool to support more affordable housing. The city of Ithaca did pass a resolution a couple of years ago saying that they wanted the IDA to deliver an incentive and require all housing developments within the downtown density zone to provide a set aside of 20% of the units as affordable units, all for-profit developers, any housing project. And with that, they wanted the IDA to deliver a 30-year tax incentive that was, I believe, 20 or 30% of an abatement of their full tax bill. The IDA's committee got back together, they looked at that recommendation, and I sat before this group, I believe it was a little over a year ago or almost a year ago now, and said, you know, the IDA has some real concerns with this recommendation. The first one really being that the amount of foregone property tax dollars, property taxes going to the school district, the county, and the city, was really very large per project in order to make this work. So, you know, trying to be good stewards of public tax dollars, the IDA said, that doesn't sit very well. Some of the other concerns were, we're an economic development agency. We're trying to support vibrant downtowns, quality of life, business, both retention and expansion here in our community so that we do have a strong tax base. We're not a housing organization. When we looked at the amount of compliance and even how to comply, we even talked to affordable housing developers to better understand how they do compliance with affordable housing. It's not just we're going to set the rent at this and it's affordable. Every applicant needs to be income qualified. There's compliance on an annual basis. As an economic development organization, we honestly just did not have the capacity or the ability to monitor all that kind of compliance. So we went back and we looked at the policy. And we did invite at several of those meetings on our committee, we had city staff, we had Seth there, I believe Laura Lewis was there, as well as a couple of other IDA members, a representative from Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services, Nels was there at some of the meetings, Jennifer Kushner was at some of the meetings. We ran through several different scenarios. How much would it cost in foregone tax dollars? What are the other options? What are other IDAs doing? How are other communities meeting their affordable housing needs? Is there a role for the IDA to play? And in looking at those scenarios, we came up with an option. One option being, and this is the policy that the IDA adopted. One option being that if you want to provide 20% of your units, you can provide 20% of your units as affordable units in your project. You would need to have someone else monitor compliance. I know the IURA talked about monitoring compliance for those projects. If it were a 100% affordable project, an affordable developer that already knows how to do that, they could do that themselves. But to provide 20% set aside of those affordable units, there would be no additional IDA incentive above the 7 or 10-year abatement schedule that we already offer. The other option, which has a significant number of benefits for the community, was to say to developers, if you can't make that work, then pay a payment in lieu that would go directly to the county's housing development fund. It would support, which has a 10-year track record of supporting affordable housing projects. The Community Housing Development Fund is able to combine those funds and leverage other state and federal funds to make projects work. If you talk to an affordable housing developer, they need subsidy to the extent of up to $150,000 or more to develop a single unit of affordable housing. The Community Housing Development Fund, on average, has provided $7,500 per unit of affordable housing that's been developed, because the developers have been able to leverage other resources. So we saw this as another way that developers could meet that requirement. We looked at several different scenarios of dollar amounts and payments. We looked at some real projects and what the return on investment was. Every project we've seen downtown at the IDA in the past at least 10 years that I've been working with the IDA, their return on investment is very low. You talk to a developer and 5 years ago, they would have said, well, an 8% return on investment is adequate. It's not great. I could put my money in the bank and probably earn a little bit more. But nowadays, we're seeing projects that their return on investment is less than 3% per year. It doesn't make financial sense, nor can they finance a project in order to move a project forward. And we've seen that time and time again with a number of housing projects downtown. With Herald Square, it was on again, it was off again, it's on again, it's almost completed. But it took, I think, about 5 years to get the finances together on that. And I'm just using that as one example, but many of the projects downtown have run into financial difficulties, and that's providing market rate and above market rate housing. You know, it's all about the income and the expenses. And if the income isn't there, there isn't a reason to develop a project. So we saw this as a way to say, okay, what's a reasonable amount that would not put projects, and looked at existing projects, wouldn't put them in the negative in terms of return. There were 3 final recommendations, and the committee chose the highest of the 3. And so that what they chose was $5,000 per unit for the total number of units in a development. $5,000 per unit would be set aside for the Community Housing Development Fund. That's pretty much the same as, we just simplified it. It's the same as saying, take 20% of your units times $25,000 per that 20%. We sort of kept that 20%. The city would like to have seen 20% of the units set aside for affordable housing. And I did put together a little bit of an example that I shared with Jennifer Kushner. She may have shared it with this group, that, you know, for a project, I'm gonna have to put my glasses on. For a project, let's see. If we had a single project, here it is. If we had a 200-unit housing project, the developer could provide a 20% set aside of affordable units. That'd be 40 units of affordable housing. We could require that they be affordable for the term of the abatement. The IDA's abatement would be 10 years. We could do that. That would be one route. Or the other option, if they paid that $5,000 per 200 units, the total units in the project, they would pay $1 million into the Community Housing Development Fund. On average, the fund supports a subsidy of $7,500 per unit. It could support over 133 units of affordable housing, as opposed to just 40 units on that one project, by leveraging other resources. So that was sort of the thinking behind it. And I know that, a lot of people say, okay, the number's too small or the number's too large. It depends on, who you're talking to. The developers would always say it's too large, everything's too large. But looking at their return on investment for some recent projects like the Cary building, which was 4 or 5 years ago, that project, it would have been underwater. They never would have been able to make it work. So what the committee did is they recognized that, it's not a perfect solution. We don't know what the perfect dollar amount is. They passed the policy with the $5,000 and per unit, and agreed that we would revisit that within a year. If every housing project that comes through gets their financing, gets under construction, they pay it without blinking, we're going to adjust the number up. If we see projects struggle, if they have to go back to the drawing board, if they can't seem to secure financing, particularly in this environment today, then we'll go back to the drawing board and come up with other ideas. It's a place to start. We're going to gather information. We know, you all know, we have lots of housing projects on the docket. Who knows how many of them will move forward, but this is a real opportunity right now to get the policy in place and to start moving forward. So the IDA has adopted this policy. And so I went back to the city. I let you all know that this is the policy they've adopted. And what we'd like to do at the very least is work with the city to get the process aligned with the city so that projects have a very clear path about where to go. Right now, the CTAP application has language in it that's outdated, not only with housing, but with some other things that we wanted to clean up, but also clean up that affordable housing language, either at the city level or not have that language at the city level any longer, so that the IDA, so that projects would really know where they need to go and what requirements they need to meet. So I think I'm being a little long-winded. I think I've given you about as much background as I can off the top of my head. And, I'm looking forward to a discussion and, the long-term implications of our relationship and working together to support more development and a more vibrant downtown now, especially more than ever.
Thanks, Heather. That was an excellent overview. Are there any questions for Heather? And I know that the main thing, if I remember from last month's meeting, is that there was some questions about how the committee came to arrive at that specific number for the in lieu payment, and whether it should be higher. That was the biggest concern. And it also sounds like the IDA has already adopted this policy. That's correct?
Yes, they did adopt the policy in July.
So for the city, I mean, I think the question we've got to decide now is, what do we do with our CTAP policy? Do we go back to paring it down so that it's just based on density and location, or do we just sort of get rid of our step altogether and just let the IDA handle it? And that's kind of what the resolution that's in the packet gives, those two options for moving forward. So are there any questions for Heather? Comments? I see Donna and then George.
So if a proposed project wouldn't be profitable without a tax abatement, how is it profitable? How is that developer able to pay this big fee? It seems like it wouldn't be profitable for them to do that either.
Well, and that's some of the fear that some projects will not move forward. And we're going to see what happens. But looking at some of the financials on every project that's come downtown, they have the ability to say, okay, we'll take the 7-year abatement, or if they want a 10-year abatement, which declines in 10% increments over that 10-year period, they do need to provide all of their financials, their construction budgets, their pro formas, everything that they would be submitting to a bank for financing. So we have quite a bit of data. It's all confidential, but I and my team have been able to look at that data and see that most projects meet the financial need scenarios that we've set, the bar that we've set. And, quite frankly, I'm a little bit worried at the $5,000 a unit that some projects might not be feasible, particularly the smaller ones. When you get into a scale of, 150, 200 units, they're going to crimp and save and try and find a way. They may have to put more equity into the deal. They may have to reduce some of the amenities. It'll be a back and forth for them to try and figure out if they can make it work.
George? Oh, sorry, Donna, did you have a follow-up?
Go ahead, Donna.
I just want to add that it seems to me that plenty of developers are able to start profitable projects downtown without tax abatement. So Teresa Alt wrote a great letter to that point, but perhaps we don't need this program, particularly for residential development anymore. And I would love to see more focus on job development, industrial development downtown, because we were focusing on hospitality and tourism, and we see now that that's not really a great place to focus right now. But even without COVID, we need more of an industrial base, a greater diversity of jobs. So I would be okay pulling back to your primary focus.
I have a lot of respect for Teresa. Teresa comes to the IDA meetings. She makes a lot of comments, and I'm always happy to sit down with Teresa and talk through, some of her thinking on some of those comments. I've seen the financials on all the projects downtown. They've all been financially very, very thin. The IDA has delivered an incentive to every multi-story larger project, and that's really where the IDA can make some impact. Every single project but 2, one of them used new market tax credits, and if you ask that developer, it took them 3 years to put it together, so they would have rather gone to the IDA. The other project, the developer is financially underwater, and he's been trying to sell it for quite some time. So, on the face of it, and me seeing the financials underneath, the costs of development downtown are very high, and they continue to be very high, and it makes development very difficult. It wasn't really until the city had increased the density, the height, and the zoning that we even saw any development, that developers could even make projects work. And that's certainly a discussion for probably when we have a lot more time to talk about the history of the IDA with the downtown density development and whether that needs to continue or not. And I'm happy to have that larger conversation. The city, there are 103 IDAs in New York State, and ours is the only policy that has a 2-step process with a municipality. And we have done that, and we have refined that process over the past 20 years to afford the city, a say in what gets developed and what doesn't. honestly, right now, the way the policy is written, without the affordable housing pieces, is it's administrative, check the boxes at the city level. It adds 90 days to the process, but you check the boxes if it's in the downtown density district, if it's more than 3 stories, and if it increases the tax base by more than $500,000, you have a public hearing, a committee approves it, sends it, the mayor sends a letter on to the IDA. It's administrative for the most part. And, the IDA very much appreciates our relationship with the city and our partnership with the city. And, we're willing to continue to deliver incentives, or we don't need to deliver incentives. And I would welcome that conversation with the IDA and with the city. I think that's a much bigger conversation.
George has been waiting patiently, and I see Cynthia has a comment.
Thanks. Thanks for coming and talking to us. I have a question and a comment. I second Donna's comment about the importance of developing good paying jobs in the city of Ithaca. And I would hope that the IDA will look at those types of developments to encourage. Doesn't have to be downtown, could be on Cherry Street. My question is about the fee in lieu of building affordable housing. If a developer who's doing a project in the city goes that route and would the money that was created with that fee be used for affordable housing inside the city, or would it be anywhere in the county?
So the community, the way that we have it written now, the Community Housing Development Fund is able to support affordable housing throughout the county. It has partners that fund it from the city, from Cornell, and from the county. They do have some guidelines about wanting to see development in the county's identified development focus areas. They have a number of sustainability requirements. They want to see it close to a bus line. But the bottom line is it supports the greater good of the entire county. A good number of projects have been funded in the city. I'd say probably the majority of them have been in the city and the town of Ithaca, closer in, because they meet those guidelines.
Thank you.
Sustainability, you're welcome.
One last final comment. The local labor component is very important. We've seen a lot of development, maybe 10 years ago, a little less, in which developers, contractors were bringing in non-union and labor that was willing to work for not the going rate and with questionable skills. That was a big problem. And I think the local labor component is essential. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And I hope you know that our construction labor committee has been revitalized, and we've been looking at the data that we've been gathering through our existing policy over the past 4 years of development. And the committee is really committed to working through that and making some further recommendations about how we can continue to and probably better support more local construction labor.
That's great. Laura said that you've got more staff now and you can do a better job at that. So that's encouraging. Thank you.
Yes.
I saw Cynthia had a comment.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, George, for mentioning the local labor component. Since that has been a requirement from the city portion of the CTAP, it would be good to receive a report on that. And I'm not sure that we have since that policy was put into place. Do you know when a report, at least on past projects, might be available?
I'm happy to come back to this committee and provide a report. I'm happy to provide it to staff. The IDA did actually adopt a countywide construction labor policy. So we're gathering data countywide. The majority of the projects, the larger projects, have been in the city. And you know, I'd be happy to come back at your request and fill you in on what we're seeing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It would be good to have a report on that. And I'm not sure if there have been any projects that have come online since the city's diversity requirement was also enacted. And I know the county also adopted that for the IDA. So
I'll just clarify that the county doesn't adopt IDA policies. The IDA did adopt that policy countywide. We've had one project that was not in the city that is owner occupied. That's following through with the diversity policy.
So the Green Star project did not meet that? Actually,
There's been two now. I believe the Green Star project did as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. You know, building on Donna's comment earlier, and I recognize that this is not what's before us now, but I do agree that I would like to see the IDA revert to its mission with regards to job creation rather than real estate development. We have seen a flurry of activity, as you've mentioned, in the downtown area that have benefited from this process. The impacts in terms of, as you mentioned, the amount of foregone tax dollars that were not received by our school district, not received by the county, not received by the city, was significant, as you identified. And I think when we first enacted this, Seth, I recall we were talking about, like, if this was considered to be fantastically successful and all these developments came online, we would have the opportunity to say, okay, we've achieved our goal and it's time to reassess. And I do feel that it is time to reassess and basically put this baby to bed and not utilize it as a resource anymore, and to allow our focus to build and develop a more diverse economy and a diversity of job opportunities and industry for our residents. So I would 100% be in support of taking it even farther and eliminating the density, location, size requirements for the city.
Any other comments or questions? We will be revisiting this issue a little later in the evening. So we've got a draft resolution to look at. So anyways, if there are no other comments or questions for Heather, just want to say thank you, Heather, for coming tonight and having the conversation. And I always appreciate your willingness and openness to come here and talk about these issues. So thank you. All right.
Thanks, Heather.
Joanne, is Teresa and Hector still in the waiting room? Sorry, Joanne, you're muted.
Yeah, Teresa Alt is up first.
Okay.
And then Hector, and then Marty Hiller has joined us as well. So
Okay, great.
if we're ready, I'm going to let Teresa in
Great, thanks.
and we'll start timing.
Hi, Teresa.
Do you see her?
Yeah, I can see her.
Oh, now I have her. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, okay, you have me and I don't have any offensive noise coming through, right?
Nope.
Good. Okay, the statement that actually many of you saw before is both on behalf of me, Teresa Alt of Eddy Street, and Teresa Halpert of South Geneva Street. You're getting from Heather 2 alternatives, but they're really the same. It's to give up city influence over the criteria. And by the way, what she hasn't talked about and what doesn't seem to be in the resolution anywhere is that early public information session. And I think that was an important part of it because the public got to hear early in the game what they were supposed to help to fund. And I know that sometimes didn't go very well for the project because people knew what other things the developers had been doing. So, you know, yeah, tax incentives are the IDA's prerogative, but as we're now hearing, they're supposed to be for jobs. And I'm glad that people are now thinking about what some people were saying some years ago, that CTAP has done its job. There's a lot of dense housing now, a lot of hotels in central downtown, soon on the waterfront too. And unfortunately, all this building has rarely brought us the workforce housing that's what we really need. And it may even be becoming counterproductive because it's taking up all the land where one could build affordable housing if, you know, and if the land's gone, then even if the funding's there, you can't build it. And that's why I came to the suggestion, abolish the CTAP program. It's not cool. I mean, Heather talks about how that 25,000 fee out, or call it 5,000 for every unit, gets leveraged in such wonderful ways. But that only happens when, you know, there's not some miracle. That happens when there's federal funding or state funding available. And if the federal and state funding goes, then locally we're left with our own sources of funding. And if we've been counting, you know, oh, just a little bit of money here will get us all this money from there. Well, if that money from there is gone, it won't. So we do have to really look at what it costs to build. I'm seeing building without any tax incentives going on like crazy up here where I live in College Town. So I just don't believe. And I've also heard from people in the know in real estate finance that you write a pro forma that shows that you have a need, that, you know, that you don't
3
have
minutes.
enough. And okay.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa.
Next, we have Hector Chang. Hi, Hector.
Hi there. This
You're-
is interesting.
Oh, you have no idea.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Hector Chang. I'm the interim program director at Bike Walk Tompkins. I'm not gonna talk too much. We actually put in a letter and that should be in your agenda packet. And it's a joint letter from us at Bike Walk Tompkins, the Friends of Stewart Park, and RIBS. We just wanted to talk a little bit about, we wanted to kind of express some of our concerns, but also excitement for the NISTOP proposal to change the way that Buffalo and Court Streets might work. But we want you to be very cautious as you go about looking at the proposal. It seems like the city is very much on the right track with some of the questions that were initially shared in the packet that went out to the public. But I just wanted to highly recommend that the city and NISDOT put the safety and comfort of people walking and biking in that corridor as their top priority. We provide some data to show that it's a very busy bicycling and pedestrian corridor. It's also a very dangerous corridor, as you know. Buffalo and Meadow is actually this intersection that has the second highest, that's ranked number 2 as the worst pedestrian intersection in the county. So when I read the NISTOP proposal, I was kind of shocked that the word pedestrian or bicyclist was not nowhere anywhere in that like specific list of proposals. And we included a list of questions that I encourage you guys to take a look at. It's kind of page 2 and 3 of that letter. Hopefully it'll guide some of your discussions with NISTOC going forward. We're here, happy to help. Both Rick and I, and also Nicholas, know this area pretty extensively. Just wanted to give you our support and our concerns at the same time. Thank you.
Thanks, Hector.
Thank you, Hector. Appreciate it. And is Marty on the line?
Marty?
Yes.
She is right now. Yep.
Hi. I'm Marty Hiller, and I am speaking tonight on behalf of the Ithaca Community Gardens. Over the past 2 years, our gardeners have put in countless hours of volunteer time planning a reconfiguration of the gardens in conjunction with the Carpenter Circle development. We're expecting to receive many benefits from the developers, including regrading and improved soils, new gardens infrastructure, and a rainwater catchment system that will provide irrigation water for our garden plots. We are looking forward to seeing this project realized. Over the past 3 months, we've been working with the developers on budgeting and finalizing design details. We're making good progress on that, but we have other major milestones that we have not reached. The developers have been stalled for many months in their negotiations with the city on the necessary real estate transaction. And we have been waiting since January for a meeting with the city to discuss the draft of our new lease. We also still have work to do both with the developers and the city to convert our non-binding memorandum of understanding into a binding legal agreement. We were expecting all of those pieces to be in place before the final approval of the PUD. The proposal in tonight's project update to subdivide the project into 2 phases turns that process on its head. We have not been included in the conversation, and we need to be included when changes that affect the gardens are under discussion. We're uncertain even how to comment on this change, as we only learned about it a couple days ago, and we haven't yet had time to fully assess it. We want to ensure that the future of the gardens, a valuable community benefit associated with this PUD, continues to be protected. We're asking that any approvals that are needed for phase 1 include conditions that ensure the garden's reconfiguration will continue to move forward. In addition to the existing contingencies for the real estate and lease agreements, we're asking for a requirement for binding legal agreements with the developers in the city that would, among other things, specify how costs will be covered and detail the timing and phasing of the movement of gardeners from the current leased land to the reconfigured gardens. We would also appreciate any help the committee or other Common Council members can offer to expedite the legal process with the city. We want to be able to put this project behind us so we can turn our attention toward improving our organization and our service to the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Is that the last of our public speakers?
That's all I have. The other, no one else signed in.
So then we also had the, there was something from the Friends of Newman. Let me see if I can find that.
Yep.
Sorry, my computer's okay. This is so this is from the Friends of Newman golf course. Friends of Newman has been closely following the developments surrounding the City Harbor project. As City Harbor's nearest neighbor, the golf course has a vested interest in seeing how this plan will ultimately be implemented. Along with preserving, promoting, and enhancing the course, we hope to make Newman more useful to our citizens and more profitable for the city. As some of you may know, Friends of Newman was instrumental in calling attention to the fact that the turnaround plan for the project encroaches on the 9th green to such an extent that it necessitates the relocation of that green approximately 70 to 80 yards north of its current location. It is our understanding that the developers have agreed to cover the costs for those relocation efforts, although we don't know if that agreement has been formalized. Perhaps this is something for your committee to reconsider. We know the golfing public would like some assurances about this. Is the city taking formal steps to secure an agreement about this? Larger part of our interest in this project has to do with the stated intention to build a new community center that would provide services to both the golfing and boating public. We support the concept of a shared community center and see it as an important feature in the overall project. Such a community center has the potential to attract more year-round activity in and around Newman and would be a tremendous improvement over the current 80-year-old clubhouse that appears to be in need of extensive maintenance. Over the past months, we have asked both the city and City Harbor development team several questions about the community center project. To date, we have yet to hear anything definitive regarding the actual construction plans, building ownership, and overall management of the space. Some of our questions include who will cover the cost of design and construction, who will own the building and or who will operate the facility, how will the construction be funded if the city is responsible for construction costs, will it require a bond initiative, is the city considering any alternatives such as intensive renovations to the current clubhouse, how will various stakeholders such as golfers, boaters, and hikers be included in the decision-making process, will there be community forums to help create the design and plans, will the center be open year-round to provide a meeting space, musical entertainment, special lectures, as well as food and beverages? How will the city and developers resolve the many issues that surround this component of the project? Where exactly will the community center be located on the course? Does the plan continue to be situated in on the site of the old 9th Green? We are very interested in this project and we are willing and able to commit time and energy when the appropriate time comes. Thank you for your time and consideration of our comments. And then I believe there was also, was there something from Robert Lynch? Is that right?
Yes, there was a comment from Robert Lynch.
Okay, I think I got it. So good evening. I wish to reiterate the concerns I expressed to your committee 1 month ago regarding the New York State Department of Transportation's West End couplet plan to reroute Route 96 traffic for 1 block segments of West Buffalo and West Court Streets. I'll say again what I said before. I don't see how this plan will work. Not only is it likely to snarl westbound traffic, particularly during Ithaca's evening commute, the change could also endanger lives by delaying Bang's ambulance access both to Hugo Medical Center and to patients who need medical attention on West Hill. I'm a council person from the town of Enfield. I speak here tonight for myself, not the board. But when County Legislator Ann Corman shared this 1 block, 1-way couplet plan with my fellow town board members September 9th, my colleagues voiced surprise and concern. We'd not heard of this plan and we questioned its feasibility and its impact on West Hill residents, including on their safety. Ambulance delays cost lives and impact every city and county resident. Moreover, while the divided 1-way traffic may appear good on paper or in a computer model, it may not work when the human factor is added in. Habits change when traffic jams. Drivers game the system. I recommend you demand hearings that DOT engineers fully explain themselves and answer our residents' questions. I really worry the state will impose this plan on Ithaca without adequate forethought. It could make for a mess. Rather than ease Route 13 congestion, it could worsen it. Please don't endorse this plan tonight. Demand more study and discussion as we responsibly redevelop Ithaca's West End. Let's not make a bad traffic situation even worse. And 1 life lost is one too many. Respectfully submitted, Robert A. Lynch, councilperson, town of Enfield. I believe that was the last of the comments we got to read into the record. All right.
Yep.
Okay, so next up is announcements, updates, and reports. So we have a memo from Nick Goldsmith summarizing sustainability efforts to date. Is Nick joining us or is this something?
No, no, I told them, we've been working so closely, I told them that I would handle anything. So I could give a brief update of where we are and just some additional information. I don't think I need to reiterate the memo that Nick sent out to you. But I would like to say that our efforts to return focus to the Green New Deal, now that we're fully staffed again, we have amped it up. We have a group that's called the Green New Deal Interim Advisory Committee that has been meeting. I think we've had 3 meetings since July, August, and September. We were on pause during the height of the pandemic, and now of course we're having remote meetings. Nick has been working on the code supplement for new buildings, and we're hoping that you will see that draft by the end of the year for adoption early in 2021. We're also looking at and working with the mayor to reintroduce the Green New Deal to our senior staff in the city of Ithaca for the city's efforts, and hope that we will be adding council and electeds to some of the topics we'll be discussing. So pretty soon, probably next week, we're going to be starting some e-blasts. So we're really trying to get the jargon and the terminology, everyone understanding what it means, a common understanding of some of that. So our first e-blast will go out next week, and that will be on carbon neutrality. And we're asking everyone who gets the email to then send it out to their listservs if they're not already on the list, just to start people thinking about how we're going to reach our goals by 2030. Some of the other e-blasts will deal with food and food security, jobs, green jobs, equity, so the Interim Advisory Group has been instrumental in writing and reviewing those, most of the credit going to Ann Rhodes. And of course, our friend and very active committee member, Kirby Edmonds, helped a lot in forming some of these. So I just want to give a shout out to him as well, wherever he may be. And we're pretty excited moving forward, and finally after our pause. So that's the update. And so just watch for things. We're going to start releasing information. Any questions?
Any questions for Joanne on that? Okay. So next up, there's a update on the Carpenter Circle project. This is, I believe, is in accordance with the PUD ordinance that we have to be updated, right? Is that the idea?
And also because we expect that the planning board may issue final approval for phase 1 of the project this month. So then it could come back to you it could come back to council for approval of the PUD. And so we wanted to just know if you had any questions or wanted to talk about anything before that happened.
Okay. So I know that there's the memos here, and we've got the resolution from the planning board. Are there any questions for Lisa, knowing that we're going to have a big discussion later in the evening about the couplet? Laura.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for this memo. Can you comment on, give any update on the funding for the affordable residential building? Is there any new information?
Well, I know that they, have put in an application for the latest funding round. So they feel that, and they have been told by HCR that having final approval would be helpful for that, for getting funding.
Thank you.
And it is in the first phase. So.
Right.
Okay, any other questions? Cynthia.
So just to follow up on a question I think I had asked months before, what happens if they don't get funding approval? And if the affordable housing project does not go through?
I believe the PUD has to come back to common council, right?
Everything, yeah, it has to
Everything
go back to the planning board. It has to basically start with that site plan that eliminates the affordable housing, or if there's a substitute. But yeah, it has to be reviewed again by council if that doesn't happen.
And there's no segmentation in the sense that the whole thing will have to come back, right? Not just phase one comes back, the whole thing comes back.
I mean, if there was a change that was inconsistent with the environmental review, then you would reopen it if,
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Is that it for questions? Okay, so then next we have the discussion about the CTAP and the workforce housing requirement. And there is a resolution in the packet. I believe this is the same resolution we had before, minus the sections on the boundary, right? Is that right, Jennifer?
Yeah, that's correct. I just deleted the whereases and the resolves that pertain to the boundary expansion.
Okay. So I guess, I mean, it's this, and this is for circulation. Is that correct? So we're circulating this.
It doesn't have to be circulated. We're recommending it be circulated.
Yes. But are you looking tonight for guidance between one of the two resolved, the highlighted section? That's the idea, that we would choose one of these and then circulate it?
Yeah, you can choose one and move it on to council, or you can choose one and circulate it with a recommended option.
Okay. So are there any, I mean, are there any questions or comments on this for staff? Do we feel like we're ready to decide on this? I see Steve is nodding his head. Is there, I mean, is there a preference between either of these options? Cynthia.
You know, I recognize what is trying to be accomplished here in terms of the confusion between the two programs. And basically, if I understand correctly, effectively the second or the last resolve 3B, for lack of a better term on the original agenda, would effectively eliminate the city's CTAP program, period, except for requesting the IDA to recognize the density, location, size, and municipal compliance requirements.
Yep.
Is that correct? I do, as I stated earlier, I think our CTAP has been enormously successful in the goals that it had set out for, that we had set out about, just under a decade ago. We have seen a fantastic number of projects come online, much to the point that there is a large population of the public that feels that we've done, almost too much too quickly. And I think that at this point in time, it definitely seems appropriate that we eliminate the CTAP altogether in terms of the density, location, size requirement. And I would support eliminating it entirely.
Well, I think that's a much bigger conversation with the IDA. I think it's like Heather was saying, that if we're going to get rid of the CTAP, it sounds like what you're saying is that you want the IDA to cease granting the abatements. And I think that's a bigger conversation than we're going to be able to have tonight. Because
I think what I'm saying is I want to eliminate the city's recommendation that abatements be given to real estate developments in the downtown area of any size, as long as they are 3 stories, $500,000 investment or more, and in the downtown map zone, and allow the CTAP or allow the IDA to look at a project on its merits and determine it in general with the view of the larger community benefit, rather than the city's focus on increasing density in the downtown core.
So does that mean you're for the resolved number 3?
Well, they're both, I don't have the updated agenda that was sent out earlier. I have the original agenda, so there were 2 number 3s. It was the last number 3, but to revise it to eliminate density, location, size, and municipal compliant. Well, I don't know. I like the municipal compliance component.
Okay, so I just want to clarify. So the resolve number 3, the highlighted, says that the city acknowledges that the IDA tax abatement application includes similar criteria for local labor, diversity, and workforce housing. And in order to reduce confusion and eliminate redundancy, the city hereby requests that the IDA application include density, location, size, and municipal compliance requirements for any city projects, and hereby eliminates the city application process for tax abatement requests. So this doesn't mean that the IDA would no longer grant abatements for, mixed-use housing projects in the urban core. All this says is that it removes the city step, which essentially is Joanne, the mayor, and Nels basically rubber stamping it and then holding a public meeting. That process would go away, and the IDA would just, and that would be basically that this program would be housed with the IDA.
Right.
Is that right?
So I guess I would suggest that of that last resolve, I would delete density, location, size, and keep municipal compliance requirement.
What?
Steve.
And so your argument is that you feel like we're dense enough or we're already too dense?
I'm arguing that I think the IDA's mandate by New York State is job development and economic development. And I'd like to see the focus to be on economic development and not real estate development in the downtown core. And the city CTAP program recommends to the IDA that the IDA support real estate development in the downtown core as a component of economic development. And I'm suggesting that we remove that recommendation.
So, I mean, essentially what you're saying is that you're proposing now that we eliminate the CTAP program altogether.
Yeah.
That's not what this, the choice that's being presented with this resolution, that's not the choice that's being presented. And I think what I was saying before, as Heather said, is if we're proposing to abolish this program, I think that's going to require a much larger conversation with the IDA. They're not here tonight. They've already adopted this workforce housing requirement that they've worked on extensively. They're now asking us to bring our policy in line with theirs. It's a much bigger conversation to say, okay, we're just going to stop granting abatements. We're going to stop incentivizing housing downtown. Doesn't mean that we can't have that conversation, but I don't think that it's in the, we need to have the IDA present, members of the IDA. We should have Heather present, just as she said earlier today, if we're going to have that conversation.
Well, as Heather has identified and has been discussed before, the decision has always been the IDA's. It's never been the city decision. The city makes a recommendation that this is the kind of economic development that it wants to see to the IDA. That the decision ultimately has always been the IDA, and they have the power to grant whether we recommend it or not. So they've always had that power vested in them. The CTAP program is merely a city recommendation. It's a city program that we recommend to the IDA. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I do believe it's entirely within the council's purview to modify that recommendation. So if what you're saying is that we can't discuss it because it's not an option that's been laid out, I'm just saying I believe that it should be an option to be laid out. And if we're not ready for that conversation now, I understand that. I do think it's a valid conversation to be had. And of course, as chair, it's up to you to determine whether or not that conversation comes forward or not. But I am requesting that conversation. I think it's time.
So, I'd say that I'm not saying that the conversation shouldn't happen. I think a discussion is important. But, as we've learned from past history, this is a complicated policy area because it involves not just the Common Council, but also the IDA. And at times, sometimes we've taken actions with the council and we find out later that the IDA is upset that they weren't involved in the conversation. All I'm saying is that if we are going to have a discussion about the larger question of whether we just want to get rid of this program altogether, I think we should be involving the IDA in that discussion. To that end, though, I mean, I would like to hear from some other folks on the committee and just their thoughts on this. Donna?
Yes, I'm in favor of what's called number 3 on the current agenda, but I do have a question about why is eliminating the density, location, and size criteria equivalent to abolishing the program? It's program, I don't understand that conclusion. And we're only requesting that. Yeah, so if we take out that we request that the IDA application include density, location, size, that's not the same as abolishing the program.
No.
Can I respond?
But Seth, you just said it was.
No, sorry. I don't believe that it is. I mean, if we go with number 3, we're not abolishing the program. What we're saying essentially is that this program will now be housed at the IDA, and we're getting rid of the city application process.
Right. But if we, but Cynthia, she didn't move it, but she suggested that we eliminate the density, location, and size requirements. And I thought you said that doing that would be equivalent to eliminating the program. No, you didn't say that?
I think Cynthia was suggesting that we have the larger conversation about getting rid of this program altogether, that the IDA no longer grant tax abatements to real estate projects in downtown Ithaca. And I think that's what I was alluding to. I think if we're going to have a conversation about we no longer want the CITAP program, then the IDA needs to be involved in that conversation. If we're just moving forward with the second or third resolve, I think that's a step we can take tonight. But I think that if we're going to have that bigger conversation about getting rid of the program altogether, I really do think that we should be involving the IDA.
Well, I'm willing to move number 3.
Is there a second? Second by Steve. Laura, you had your hand up before. I don't know. Did you have a comment?
Well, no, I was just going to add that I think this is a larger discussion if we're talking about eliminating CTAP, and that's a decision that would rest with the IDA, so it's a larger conversation. And I think what number 3 does, and I would support Donna's motion as well, is that this will eliminate redundancy. It will make the process more clear and more transparent and more timely for anyone who does apply to the program. And I think it would be good to have the larger conversation with all of council and with the IDA. But for tonight, I would second the resolve to eliminate the city application process.
And Donna? And then Cynthia.
I do have a question about those phrases, the density, location, and size requirements. And I know that they're not binding to the IDA, but the implication of that is that the IDA then in the city would give preference. We're asking the IDA to give preference to dense housing projects rather than less dense, say, light manufacturing and technology businesses. Is that correct? Because they're not dense. Nobody lives there.
I mean, my understanding is that they still can grant tax abatements to manufacturing.
Well, and that's their primary purpose. So
that's the primary purpose.
They don't even have to come through the city. They just can go straight to the IDA.
I mean, essentially, this is a program that was created that's sort of extracurricular supplemental to their primary mission. And the idea is that we were trying, and then, this is an old program. It goes all the way back to the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Trying to spur more compact mixed-use development in the urban core of the city. And the rationale is that it's so expensive to develop in those areas that the incentive is necessary to facilitate the project.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's, as you can see, been very successful.
But to Cynthia's point, I mean, and I think Teresa made the point too, is that it has been really successful. I mean, does there come a point when we want to talk about the future of this program? I mean, if we want to have that bigger conversation, I'm more than willing to do that, but I just think it's involved. Cynthia, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think you're alluding to it now. We have no power to grant a tax abatement. What the CTAP is a recommendation process. It sets forward a set of priorities that, based on these priorities, we recommend to the IDA. And in fact, it's not even us, really. It's the mayor writing a letter, because there's never a vote of council to recommend a project for a tax abatement. We receive a public hearing, and we are part of a public hearing, but council actually doesn't have any action in this. And so it is about what are our priorities here. And if we are going through this process now, and this might be a good time to have this conversation, just to clarify what it is that we are recommending. So yeah, just to clarify, the city has no authority in this. The CTAP is merely a recommendation process, as I understand, to the IDA. That's all it is.
Yep. So we do have a motion on the table. Any further discussion on the motion? So this is Donna moved number 3. I think Steve seconded. So all in favor of option number 3? And all opposed? And that carries 4-1. So now we're back to the original resolution. So the idea was to circulate this so that we would take another month on this? Or do we want to move forward to council?
It doesn't have to be circulated, but so it's really your comfort level of taking it right on to council, or we can circulate and bring it back next month. Doesn't require circulation.
Steve, did you have your hand up?
I'm fine moving it on to council, but I understand if folks want to circulate it instead, but I'll move to send it on to council.
Okay. Seconded by Laura. Yeah, I think I'm in favor of moving on to council. I mean, if it turns out we need more time, we can always table it. I think having this discussion with the full council is beneficial. So any other further comment on this? All in favor of sending this on to council? All opposed? And that carries 4-1. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Next up, we have the waterfront guidelines. Do we have Alex on, or is this?
He was on, but he dropped off, and I'm not quite sure why. But
And this is circulation, correct?
this would be for circulation, and it's a fairly simple change.
Yeah. I mean, it seems pretty innocuous. It's just sort of a housekeeping item,
It
isn't it?
really is housekeeping, and it's just to bring the previous zoning designations in the waterfront area and reclassify them into the new zoning.
All right.
Jen, did you have anything to add to that?
It's just that it's a really minor change. It's just to change the zoning because it refers to the waterfront zones.
I don't even think it needs to be circulated. It's not substantive. It's housekeeping.
Do you want to send it? Could we send it to council?
I think it can go straight to council. Yep.
Steve, do you want to move that? Steve moves, Laura seconds. Any comment on this? Are we ready to send this on to council? All in favor?
Perfect.
That carries unanimously. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
And then are we on to the couplet now?
Sorry. Oh, I've lost my agenda, but yes, that is our next agenda item.
And this is just a discussion tonight. It's a big, complicated topic.
Complicated, and we have some good news that
Right.
kind of changes the shifts that focus that we were going to talk about tonight. So I think most of you got the email today from probably various sources about the build grant, federal grant, for the planning study of the Route 13 corridor. So with that, which was very good news, it's hard to get a build grant. I don't know that we've ever gotten one. We've applied multiple times. And kudos to engineering and planning and IURA. Everyone had a hand in it. So Lisa, you want to just take it away from there?
Sure. Yeah. As you saw, I did not include a resolution in your packet this time because after getting all the comments, we circulated as you requested, and you have the comments. You've received the comments in your packet. I think there was some of them got taken out of the packet, but we'll make sure you have all of the comments. And then, the other thing that happened this month was, we really understood that a DOT was requiring like a approval and concept of the couplet for them to permit any work in the DOT right away related to City Harbor and Carpenter Circle projects. And so there was some urgency to get this going. And as you recall, the Carpenter Circle has, the 5th Street intersection, as well as sidewalks and other work in the DOT right of way. And City Harbor had a lot of work on the intersection, including a really upgraded pedestrian and bike crossings. So that's why we were bringing it to you originally. And then, the planning board last month decided to grant final approval of the City Harbor project, feeling that construction was going to last 24 months. The city and the applicant and DOT could continue to work on this during the construction period, and they didn't see a reason to hold it up. So we expect them to do the same for Carpenter Circle this month for phase 1. So, it gave us a little chance to kind of step back and say, okay, well, what do we want to do in the waterfront? And you saw the map that we provided in your packet of all the project sites that are somehow in play, and we're expecting either they're built, they're under construction, they're expected to be under construction, or we expect them to come. So we're feeling like, we really need, maybe the couplet is a good idea, or the investigation of it is a good idea, but we really need something that's going to serve the whole waterfront vision. I mean, I think the city, like when you adopted the zoning and the waterfront plan and the design guidelines, it was really setting the stage for all this development, and we never expected it to happen so fast. And so until we figure this out, I think we're going to continue to have, I don't want to really call them conflicts, but disagreements, fundamental disagreements with the DOT. I mean, we're on perfectly good terms, but they want to get cars through the corridor as fast as possible. And the city has a vision of like multimodal transportation and mixed use development. It's kind of a different approach. And so, with that, and then suddenly we get this, and we heard today that we got the build grant. I think there's more of an opportunity to really work with DOT and look at the corridor and what the city's vision for it is, and work with DOT together to, explore the, maybe it's the couplet, but it's also the, transformation of Route 13. So it's more, I think we're more just giving an update on that than asking for any particular decision, because since we heard about the build grant, we do have to follow up with DOT and find out what it means for us to work together on this. So, and how we can hopefully design the scope to include the accommodating the development that you saw on the map that was in your packet.
Do we have a sense of how the build grant will be incorporated into? I mean, are you thinking about it as like almost like a study of, or would it replace like the traffic study that was being proposed? Or
I think that, so it's for planning and design. So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of data collected for these two projects that could certainly be used as part of the planning. I mean, I think that, and with that map, if you did a build out, you could, I mean, we have I think we got a lot of data that could be used for the planning. And then the design is it's planning in terms of the analysis of what do we need. And I think the big question is also how do we come together with DOT to, we have slightly differing objectives for the waterfront. How do we find a compromise there? And then it would be designed for whatever interventions were selected. We already know what some of those are going to be, the 5th Street intersection, and
right,
which is partially designed already.
Yeah, and part of our conversation yesterday, which was quite lengthy, and Seth was a part of that, is our approach tonight was going to appeal to Common Council to consider funding or partially funding a study for the corridor, because we just feel like, moving forward with these development projects, we're going to run into the exact same issues for everyone. And now that we know that the DOT site sold on yesterday, it was actually, and that was about $1 million over the minimum bid price. So we're going to be facing this with all of that development, and but because we got the build grant, we feel as though we'll be able to study it, including the couplet, which I know we had public comment about tonight. There's a lot of concern, as you saw in your packets, and that's just one of the options. There really, with a comprehensive look, there may be many others. We just don't know until someone takes a look. But as Lisa said, we have a lot of data for the traffic on the corridor. And the timing is important, so we have to get going on that study.
Cynthia.
Thank you. I have a couple questions about the grant itself. So I found the email from Nels, and he announces the grant for 1.4 million that has been approved. It says that it's a 50% grant. So are we then the city or on the hook for $700,000 to fund the other component for planning and design?
I don't think it has to be cash match. I think can be, I think the developments were used as part of the match. I don't know the details of it, but certainly that's one of the issues that we're going to have to figure out. But I think the development, the private development that was going on was used as in the calculation of the match for the grant application. So.
Okay, so that, thank you. Yeah. About the money first.
I mean, they've already done, for instance, City Harbor and Carpenter Circle, both of which are doing exactly what we wanted to do in the grant, are going to design those intersections. And so that's already a match, part of the match right there. But
okay,
I don't know what the exact figures.
One of the aspects of this that I'm very interested to learn more about, which is, what exactly is going to be the study area when we are looking at these traffic impacts. I know that there's been, as you mentioned, quite a bit of work looking at 5th Street, Day Street, Day, 5th, 3rd. But when I think about the couplet and the impacts of the couplet, I'm looking, very distinctively at Inlet Island. I'm looking very distinctively at that really, really narrow corridor. If northbound trucks coming up Meadow want to get over to Taganic. They don't want to go around to Court and then do an S-turn and then come back. They're going to turn on State or Seneca and then end up on that little itty bitty 1 lane in each direction segment of Taganic Boulevard. So, you know, having a better understanding of where the study area is going to be and the scope of that, I think is going to be important for us to be able to provide feedback, and also the community to be able to provide feedback and say, I think the impacts of this might go in this direction or this direction. Can we make sure that it is included in any kind of analysis that's being done?
Yeah, agree.
Donna. Sorry, Donna, you're muted.
That's okay, because I was just hemming and hawing anyway. The letter from Nell said that it's for planning and design of the corridor north of Purity, but that's not where the problem is. It's south of Purity, right?
Well, that was where, I mean,
Wait.
so can I answer that question? Sorry. Yeah, the in the grant application, the segment is like about a mile long, and it goes from Purity Point to Fall Creek. That is the area for design for the transformation of Route 13 into an urban boulevard. That's what the grant is for. So one of our questions would be, can we expand that scope to look at other things, and how do we do that? Right? Would you say, Joanne?
Yes, exactly. And it is a DOT grant, so we're hoping that they will see the wisdom in including the couplets.
Yeah.
In that.
Any further questions? Cynthia.
So when will we as a committee be kept informed as all of these pieces come together, in terms of the scope, in terms of the funding, in terms of negotiation with DOT and what is required?
I think first we have to get together with DOT and internally and figure out, what we're doing, and if, ask some of the questions, look at and then we will of course involve council in every way. Yeah.
I would imagine we're trying to set up a meeting for next week with DOT and with our, with Eric Hathaway and Tim Logue, who could be here tonight, and to just kind of have this basically the conversation we're having now with them. And then we truly would like to come up with all the tasks that are going to be involved in a timeline. And since we feel as though we have so much development right on the cusp, we're going to need to move quickly. So I can say that as we, if any decisions are made, we could certainly let council know, but we will definitely have a report at next month's planning committee meeting. It will have a lot more details about the grant. As we said, we just got it today and it came as a complete surprise. So,
George.
Hi, thanks, Seth. I agree with Lisa's comment that DOT looks to move cars through neighborhoods as quickly as possible. I can see how this couplet idea would move cars eastward at rush hour in the morning more quickly. But that's about the only quasi-positive thing I can see in it. Moving west on Court Street at the end of the day would be a nightmare. And when we're thinking about this, I would just like us to remember that there are a number of businesses that are existing on these two blocks, on Court Street and on Buffalo Street. There are quite a few houses on Court Street still. There's about to be a 5-story apartment building on Court Street. All these business owners are already vehemently opposed to this idea for pretty obvious reasons. And And the Court Street component would eliminate street parking on Court Street, which there's not much on-street parking left on the west end. I realize it's not entirely the same, but when the DOT redesigned Route 13 to include Fulton Street, they argued that this would be great for businesses on Fulton Street because so many more cars would be driving past their businesses, and was made Fulton Street unlivable. There's no houses there occupied at all, I don't think anymore. And there used to be quite a few. And the businesses along Fulton Street are either gone or find Fulton Street very difficult to deal with because the traffic is moving so fast and so congestedly. So I really think we need to look at this not just as something that will allow us to develop more, but as a way we need to protect what we have. And that includes pedestrian safety and bicycle safety, which Court Street is the best way east-west right now for both those things. I don't really understand, maybe Tim and Eric can help me understand this. I don't understand how making Buffalo Street one way improves the traffic flow in front of Carpenter or
Well, that's a good observation, George.
That's a really good observation.
Yeah.
And
that's a good,
yeah. And you did point out a couple of important things, and that is that we have a fundamental difference in the vision for Route 13 with the DOT. They want to move cars.
Right.
They want to get them through, and that's the couplet is part of that philosophy. Whereas we would like to see the waterfront and the neighborhoods knit together and not have Route 13 be such a dividing line for the, for the city. And I agree with you about Fulton Street businesses and residents. Yeah, it proved to just be not livable. So, but the DOT does own that. They do have jurisdiction over it. So these are the conversations that we find frustrating, but that we have to continue to have with DOT.
Cynthia has her hand up, and then I've got, and then Laura.
Thank you. In addition, there was a comment that was included in the packet, making some assumptions about the impact of the rail line, that it is reduced now, and then we shouldn't be considering the impact, and maybe we can claim some space from it. I just want to caution that it's inadvisable to make any assumptions about the future use of the rail line because it's something that is entirely outside of city or state control. And I fully anticipate the use of that rail line to increase despite activities going up at Milliken Station or Cargill. The other thing I wanted to post out there, and maybe this is something because I used to live in a big city, even though I don't now, is there an exploration of, I guess, for lack of a better term, I know there's a phrase for this, like surge traffic, where maybe one lane would convert in one way in one direction during a certain period of time, and then another lane in the other direction a certain period of time. That's something, I don't know if that's even something we could do, but if that is something that could be entertained. And then lastly, I just want to remember that part of both the beauty and the curse of the location of Ithaca is that we are the location that you have to come through if you want to go east or west anywhere along the line of Cayuga Lake. So I know that we really do strive to reduce the demand or use of cars in our own community. But for people who are trying to get east or west, whether you want to stop in Ithaca or not, you have to come through that bottleneck. So there are certain traffic demands that are part of our control, but a significant portion is not. And most anyone can tell you, at least in my experience, summertime, Friday traffic through Route 13 is outrageous, but I think it has mostly to do with people coming through this area trying to get to properties along the lakes. So there's that component that is entirely outside of our control. But as this area, it becomes more attractive for a whole multitude of reasons, I don't expect that demand to decrease. So just remembering that that is one of the forces that we have to contend with.
Laura?
Yeah, thank you. A number of commenters encouraged that we be looking at multimodal transportation concerns. DOT, as has been noted, is really concerned with moving cars. And a number of us in the city are concerned with pedestrians, are concerned with bicyclists, are concerned with kids walking to school and their safety. One other commenter made a statement about a study indicating that the speed of car traffic on one-way streets increases. And I'd be interested in knowing more about that. Is it in fact, what is the success, if there is any, of streets being converted from two-way traffic to one-way traffic? What is the impact on the speed of vehicles traveling on those roads? And, as has been mentioned, I have real concerns about the businesses. We've heard from Ithaca Bakery, we've heard from the veterinarians business on Court Street, and there would be real concerns with people accessing those businesses. And, we were having a conversation earlier about wanting to support local businesses. And so I'd hate to see some unintended consequence of a move that would disadvantage local businesses.
Thanks, Laura. And I think just to kind of generalize a bit, I don't think the couplet plan is perfect at any rate. I think what's going on is that the DOT is responding to the traffic and looking at this from a 10,000 foot kind of view. And as Joanne said, they're trying to circulate cars. That's their primary focus. And we have a different vision. And 24 hours ago, I think we were really racking our brains thinking, like, how are we going to move this forward? Like, where's the money going to come from to do the study? But the build grant seems like it's been a game changer. And, I'm really excited about that. I know that, it's been really challenging for the city to get these grants in the past. And I know we've put a huge amount of work year after year trying to get these grants. And I really want to just applaud all the work that engineering has done and planning. And I think it's exciting. I think we actually have an opportunity now, and it's nice to have the money to actually invest and do some planning and really try to get that corridor to look like something that the community can value. So thank you to everybody that's put in so much work on that. Any other comments on this? All right. Well, thanks for the update, Lisa. And it sounds like we'll get an update next month at PEDC. So thank you. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but is that I think that's the end, right? Do we just have minutes? Is there a motion on the minutes? Motion by Cynthia, second by Steve. All in favor of approving the minutes? And that carries unanimously. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Donna, seconded by Cynthia. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, we're early.
Yeah.
Even with the technical
We had the
difficulties.
technical difficulties.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Anyway,
Thank
It's a
you.
miracle.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah.
Great job.
good night.
Thanks. Good night.